My name is Elena, and the day I rolled my wheelchair into that courtroom and watched my ex-fiance's face turn white as a ghost was the day I understood that revenge isn't about anger. It's about truth finally having its moment to speak. Marcus had told everyone I was unstable, damaged, a liar desperate for attention. But as the judge read the evidence aloud, as his lawyer scrambled for objections that never came, as his perfect mask cracked in front of his parents, my parents, and everyone who'd chosen his word over mine, I didn't feel rage. I felt free. Have you ever loved someone so completely that you ignored every red flag waving in your face? Let me back up. 3 years ago, I wasn't in a wheelchair. I was a competitive swimmer, a physical therapy student at State University, and engaged to a man I thought was my forever. Marcus Chen was everything my traditional Filipino family had prayed for. Pre-med, from a good family, respectful to elders, the kind of guy who brought flowers to Sunday dinner and remembered everyone's birthdays. We met at a hospital charity event where I was volunteering. He made me laugh. He seemed kind. He seemed safe. The accident happened 8 months before our wedding. A drunk driver ran a red light while I was crossing the street after my evening run. Shattered spine, crushed pelvis, months of surgery and rehabilitation. The doctor said I'd never walk again. I was 24 years old, and my entire identity, athlete, dancer, the daughter who made her immigrant parents proud, evaporated in the space of one traumatic impact. Marcus visited me every day in the hospital those first 2 weeks. He held my hand. He whispered that we'd get through this together. My mother cried tears of gratitude, saying I'd found a man who truly loved me. My father, usually stoic, embraced Marcus like a son and told him he was blessed to have such character. But something changed after the doctors confirmed the paralysis was permanent. Marcus's visits became shorter. His smiles seemed forced. He stopped talking about our wedding and started talking about taking things one day at a time. When I tried to discuss postponing rather than canceling, he'd change the subject. When I reached for his hand, he'd check his phone. The breakup came 3 months after the accident, in my childhood bedroom where I was living again because our apartment had stairs. He sat on the edge of my bed, the same bed where we'd planned our honeymoon, where he'd proposed with his grandmother's ring, and delivered the words with clinical precision. Elena, I've thought about this a lot. I don't think I'm strong enough to be the kind of partner you need now. You deserve someone who can handle this situation better than me. I remember staring at him, my brain refusing to process what was happening. What situation? Marcus, I'm still me. I'm still Elena. I know, but everything's different now. My parents think it's too much for me to take on at this stage of my life. Medical school is demanding, and with your ongoing care needs, he trailed off, unable or unwilling to finish the cruelty. Your parents? What about what you think? What about the promises you made? He stood up, already backing toward the door. I'm sorry, I really am. But I think this is what's best for both of us in the long run. The ring, his grandmother's ring, he asked for back, said it was a family heirloom. I pulled it off my finger, my hand shaking so hard I almost dropped it, and threw it at his chest. He caught it, pocketed it, and left. I heard his car start. I heard him drive away. And then I heard my mother crying in the kitchen, my father's voice low and angry, both of them undoubtedly ashamed that their disabled daughter couldn't even keep a fiance. But that wasn't the revenge story. That was just the beginning. I wish I could say I handled the breakup with dignity. I didn't. I fell apart. Depression swallowed me whole for weeks. I couldn't see a future where I mattered, where I was wanted, where I was anything more than a burden. My parents tried to help, but they didn't understand. They came from a generation and culture where you just endured, where you didn't talk about feelings, where strength meant silence. My younger sister Maya was the one who finally broke through. She was 19, fierce and furious on my behalf. She'd burst into my room one morning, thrown open the curtains I'd kept closed for days, and said, "You're going to let him win? You're going to let that coward and his judgmental family decide your worth. Get up, Elena. Get angry. Then get even. How? I'd whispered. How do I get even with someone who has everything while I have nothing? You rebuild, she said simply. You become so successful, so happy, so undeniably amazing that everyone who doubted you has to choke on their own prejudice. It sounded impossible. But Maya didn't give me a choice. She forced me back into physical therapy, back into my online classes, back into life. Slowly, painfully, I began to surface. 6 months after Marcus left, I saw his engagement announcement on social media. He tagged a girl named Jennifer Wu, petite, able-bodied, from an even wealthier family than his. The caption read, "Found my forever. Can't wait to start our life together." The comments were full of congratulations. His mother had commented with heart emojis and, "Finally, my son has found true happiness." That word, finally, cut deeper than the initial breakup. As if our 3 years together, as if the promises he'd made in hospital rooms, as if I had never mattered at all. I called Maya, sobbing. He's moved on, he's happy, and I'm still here, stuck. No, Maya said firmly. He's a coward who took the easy path. You're a survivor who's doing the hard work of rebuilding. Those aren't the same thing, Elena. Don't you dare let his happiness diminish your progress. But then the rumors started, and that's when everything got darker. I first heard about them from my aunt, who'd heard from a family friend, who'd heard from someone at Marcus's parents' church. The story Marcus was apparently telling was that I'd become difficult after the accident, demanding, manipulative, that I'd try to trap him with guilt and threats, that he'd had to escape an increasingly toxic situation. When I confronted him via text, stupid I know, but I was desperate for answers, his response was cold. People are naturally curious about why we broke up. I've just been honest about how challenging the situation became. Maybe if you'd handled things better, we'd still be together. I stared at that message for hours. The gaslighting was so smooth, so subtle. He'd rewritten our history to make himself the victim, and me the villain. And because he was charming, because his family was respected in our community, because I was the one physically broken. People believed him. My mother started getting pitying looks at church. My father stopped talking about me to his colleagues. Friends who'd sent well wishes after the accident began to distance themselves. And Marcus, he was thriving, posting photos of romantic dinners and weekend getaways, his beautiful fiance glowing beside him. I made a decision then. I couldn't change people's minds with words. Marcus had poisoned that well. But I could change them with actions, with success, with undeniable proof that I was more than what had happened to me, more than anyone's dismissive narrative. I threw myself into my studies with an intensity that probably wasn't healthy. I finished my degree a semester early, graduated summa cum laude, and immediately started my master's program in physical therapy with a focus on adaptive sports medicine. I volunteered at adaptive sports programs, worked with Paralympic athletes, and started a blog about disability advocacy that slowly gained a following. But I also did something else, something I'm not entirely proud of but won't apologize for. I started documenting everything. Every text message Marcus had sent me, every email, every social media interaction. I saved screenshots of his engagement announcement and the timeline of how quickly he'd moved on. I kept records of the rumors I'd heard and the people who'd spread them. I wasn't sure what I'd do with this information, but some instinct told me to preserve the truth, even if no one was listening yet. A year after our breakup, I was invited to speak at a physical therapy conference about adaptive sports rehabilitation. It was a small panel, but it mattered to me. I'd worked hard on my presentation, on my professional reputation, on building a life that meant something. Marcus and Jennifer's wedding was the same weekend. I saw the photos online. Lavish ceremony, hundreds of guests, everything picture perfect. His mother had posted extensively about her perfect daughter-in-law and how blessed their family was. I'd be lying if I said it didn't hurt. But I also felt something else, a quiet confidence that I was exactly where I needed to be. Then, 2 months after his wedding, Marcus sent me a message. It was late at night, and the text was long, rambling. He said he'd made a mistake, that he thought about me often, that Jennifer was nice but didn't understand him the way I had, that maybe we could meet for coffee, just to talk. I read that message 3 times, feeling emotions I thought I'd buried surge back. For maybe 30 seconds, I considered responding, considered the vindication of being wanted again by someone who'd thrown me away. Then I saw the timestamp, 2:15 in the morning. I checked his social media. He'd posted a photo with Jennifer just 3 hours earlier, both of them dressed up, her hand on his arm, caption reading, "Date night with my beautiful wife." He wasn't reaching out because he missed me. He was reaching out because his perfect life wasn't filling whatever void existed inside him. I was a nostalgic escape, a ego boost, maybe even an affair in the making. But I wasn't a person to him. I'd never been a person to him. I blocked his number, blocked his social media, and then I did something that would eventually lead to everything that followed. I screenshot that message and added it to my documentation folder. 3 months later, I got a call from Maya. She was crying, which immediately terrified me because Maya never cried. "Elena, I need to tell you something, and you're going to be furious, but I need you to stay calm." Apparently, Jennifer Wu had reached out to Maya through a mutual friend. Jennifer had found text messages on Marcus's phone, messages to multiple women, including me. She'd also found financial records that didn't make sense, credit card statements for hotels and restaurants that didn't match the dates he told her he was working or studying. When she confronted him, he'd broken down and confessed to serial cheating throughout their entire relationship, starting even before their engagement. But here's where it got worse. Marcus had told Jennifer that he'd learned his pattern of infidelity from his relationship with me, that I'd been unfaithful during our engagement, that I'd been manipulative and controlling, and that his behavior now was a trauma response to how I'd treated him. Jennifer, to her credit, didn't believe him entirely. Something about his story didn't add up. She'd done some digging, found my blog, read my advocacy work, and realized the person Marcus described bore no resemblance to the person she was reading about. She wanted to meet with me. We met at a quiet coffee shop across town, both of us nervous and uncertain. Jennifer was elegant and composed, but I could see the pain etched in her face. She'd been married for 4 months and had just discovered her entire relationship was built on lies. "I don't know what's true anymore," she said softly, "but I need to understand who I married. Marcus has told me so many stories about you, about his past, and none of it fits with the evidence I'm finding. Please, just tell me the truth." So I did. I showed her everything. The text messages from our relationship showing his growing distance after my accident, the breakup conversation, the timeline of how quickly he'd moved on, his recent late-night message to me, the rumors he'd spread and how they devastated my family's reputation. Jennifer went pale as she read through it all. When she finished, she was shaking. "He told me you were obsessed with him, that you'd threatened him, that you tried to ruin his engagement out of jealousy." "I've never contacted him except to respond when he reached out to me," I said quietly. "And I blocked him after that last message. Jennifer, I'm not telling you this to break up your marriage. I'm telling you because you asked for the truth, and I think you deserve to know who you're really married to." She was silent for a long moment. Then she said, "His family, they knew, didn't they? His mother. She made comments about you being unstable. She discouraged him from staying with you after your accident. She told me I was such an upgrade, that Marcus had finally found someone suitable." The pieces were clicking into place. Marcus wasn't just a weak man who'd crumbled under pressure. He was a product of a family that valued appearance over character, status over humanity. And I'd been collateral damage in their pursuit of perfection. Jennifer asked if she could keep copies of my documentation. I agreed. She thanked me, her voice thick with emotion, and left. I didn't expect to hear from her again. But 2 weeks later, she called me. I'm filing for divorce, and I think you should consider a defamation lawsuit. What? Marcus's lies about you weren't just personal gossip, she explained. He told his residency program supervisor that his engagement ended because of your unstable behavior. He implied you'd been violent. Elena, those statements affected your reputation in a professional community. They're documented in emails I found. And they're provably false. My hands started shaking. I didn't know he'd done that. I didn't know it went that far. There's more, Jennifer continued. His family has been making similar statements at their church and in their social circles. They've been positioning themselves as the gracious victims who tried to support you, but ultimately had to protect their son from your dysfunction. It's calculated character assassination, and it's actionable. I'd never considered legal action. I'd been so focused on rebuilding my own life that I hadn't thought about holding Marcus accountable for destroying my reputation. But Jennifer was right. This wasn't just about hurt feelings. This was about documented lies that had affected my standing in my professional community, my family's social position, and my own mental health. I consulted with a lawyer who specialized in defamation cases. She reviewed everything: the messages, the emails, the timeline, the witnesses who could attest to the rumors, the professional damage. After 3 hours, she looked up at me and said, "You have a case, a strong one. But I need to be honest with you. This will be brutal. They'll try to paint you as vindictive, as using your disability for sympathy, as someone who can't let go. Are you prepared for that?" I thought about everything I'd survived: the accident, the surgeries, the rehabilitation, the breakup, the depression, the slow, agonizing process of rebuilding my sense of self, the rumors whispered behind my back, the pitying looks, the isolation. "Yes," I said, "I'm prepared." The lawsuit took 8 months to wind through the legal system. During that time, Marcus's family tried everything to make it go away. They offered money. They had their lawyer send threatening letters. They spread more rumors about me being litigious and bitter. My own parents begged me to drop it, terrified of the scandal, worried about what the community would think. But something had shifted in me. I wasn't the heartbroken girl in the wheelchair anymore, desperate to be loved and accepted. I was a woman who'd survived something terrible and come out stronger. I had my master's degree. I had a job at a prestigious rehabilitation center. I had my own apartment, modified to my needs, paid for with my own income. I had friends who saw my worth. I had a life that mattered. And I had the truth. The trial lasted 3 days. Marcus's lawyer tried to dismiss the case, arguing that personal opinions couldn't be defamation. But my lawyer presented the evidence methodically: the specific false statements Marcus had made to his supervisor, to mutual friends, to his family. The documented timeline showing how quickly he'd moved on, contradicting his claims that I'd been harassing him. The professional damage, invitations to speak that had been withdrawn, networking opportunities that had evaporated, directly correlated to the rumors. The most powerful moment came when Jennifer testified. She'd found emails between Marcus and his mother discussing their strategy for managing the narrative about our breakup. Mrs. Chen had literally written, "We need to make sure everyone understands that she became impossible to deal with after the accident. We can't have people thinking Marcus is the kind of man who abandons a disabled girl. That looks terrible. Better if they think he was forced to leave an unstable situation." The courtroom was silent as those words were read aloud. I watched Marcus's mother's face crumble. I watched my own mother finally understand what had been done to me, to our family. I watched Marcus himself seem to shrink in his seat, his lawyer's hand on his arm the only thing keeping him upright. My testimony was last. The judge asked me directly what I hoped to achieve with this lawsuit. I took a breath, looked at Marcus, at his parents, at my parents, and said, "Your Honor, I'm not here for revenge. I'm here because these lies nearly destroyed me at the most vulnerable point in my life. I'm here because my family has suffered socially and emotionally due to calculated falsehoods. I'm here because other people, other disabled people, other women, other anyone who's been cast aside and then villainized for it, deserve to see that the truth matters. That you can't just rewrite someone's history to make yourself look better. I want the record corrected. I want an apology. And I want everyone who believed those lies to know what actually happened." The judge ruled in my favor. Marcus and his family were ordered to pay damages for defamation, to issue public apologies, and to send correction letters to everyone who'd received the false information. The amount wasn't life-changing money, but that wasn't the point. The point was the verdict. The point was the public record. The point was the truth, finally officially acknowledged. But the real moment, the one that stays with me, came after the verdict was read. As we were leaving the courtroom, Marcus's mother approached my mother. I saw her from across the hallway, and for a moment I thought there might be violence. My mother's face was stone. Mrs. Chen bowed her head, tears streaming down her face, and said in Mandarin, "I'm sorry. I was wrong about your daughter. I was so wrong." My mother didn't accept the apology. She simply said, "You broke her heart. You tried to break her spirit. You failed. That's all you need to know." Then my mother turned, came to where I sat in my wheelchair, and did something she'd never done in public. She knelt down, took my face in her hands, and said in Tagalog, "I'm proud of you. Not because you won, because you never stopped being strong, because you never became bitter, because you proved that our worth isn't measured by our legs but by our hearts. I'm sorry I didn't see that sooner. I ugly cried in that courthouse hallway. So did Maya, who'd been my shadow through the whole trial. Even my father, stoic to his core, had tears in his eyes. Marcus tried to approach me once while his parents were distracted with their lawyer. He looked hollow, aged beyond his years. "Elena, No," I said simply. "You don't get to explain. You don't get closure. You get to live with what you did." He nodded slowly and walked away. I never saw him again. Jennifer and I stayed in touch. She rebuilt her life too, went back to school, eventually remarried someone who actually deserved her. We're not close friends. Too much complicated history. But we text on birthdays and holidays. She once told me that meeting me saved her from years of suffering she hadn't even realized was coming. The aftermath of the trial was strange. Some people apologized. Some people doubled down on their support for Marcus, unable or unwilling to admit they'd been wrong. Some people just disappeared from my life entirely, which was fine. The ones who mattered stayed. The ones who showed up during the darkest time, who never doubted, who celebrated my victories and held me through defeats. Those are the people who make up my life now. I still work in adaptive sports rehabilitation. I've published papers on trauma recovery and physical therapy. I've spoken at international conferences. I've trained Paralympic athletes who've gone on to win medals. I've built a life that's bigger and more meaningful than the one I'd imagined before the accident, before Marcus, before everything fell apart and forced me to rebuild from scratch. Do I still think about him sometimes? Honestly, yes. Not with longing. That died in the courthouse. But with a strange sort of gratitude. His cruelty forced me to find my own strength. His lies forced me to fight for my truth. His betrayal forced me to learn that my worth was never dependent on his love or anyone's approval. I'm 30 now. I've been in my wheelchair for 6 years. I've had relationships since Marcus. Good ones, complicated ones, ones that taught me more about myself. I've learned that disability isn't tragedy. It's just another way of being human. I've learned that revenge isn't about hurting the people who hurt you. It's about refusing to let their harm define your story. Last month, I gave the keynote speech at the same university where Marcus went to medical school. The irony wasn't lost on me. As I wheeled onto that stage, looking out at hundreds of faces, I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who believed her life was over when her legs stopped working, the one who thought being left made her worthless, the one who nearly gave up entirely. I started my speech with a story about falling apart and rebuilding. I talked about the accident. I talked about betrayal, though I didn't name names. Everyone who knew knew. I talked about the lawsuit, about fighting for truth, about the difference between justice and vengeance. And I ended with this. The people who tried to diminish me taught me the most valuable lesson of my life, that I am not diminished by what's been taken from me, only by what I failed to do with what remains. My wheelchair doesn't define me. My scars don't define me. Not even the people who hurt me get to define me. I define me, and that's a power no one can ever take away. The standing ovation was long and loud, but more than that, afterward, dozens of people, students, faculty, staff, approached me with their own stories of survival, of rebuilding, of refusing to be reduced to other people's narratives. Some were disabled, some weren't. All of them understood that the real revenge isn't making someone suffer for what they did to you. The real revenge is becoming so fully yourself, so genuinely happy, so undeniably successful that their worst predictions about your failure become laughable. The real revenge is looking back at the person who said you weren't enough and realizing you're grateful they left, because you never would have found yourself otherwise. I saw Marcus one more time, by accident, in a hospital where I was consulting with their rehab department. He was finishing his residency there. We passed in a hallway. He opened his mouth like he might speak. I gave him a polite nod, the kind you give a stranger, and kept moving. I had a meeting, I had patients waiting, I had a life that didn't include space for his regret. That's the thing about real closure. It's not dramatic. It's not a big confrontation where you tell someone off and they finally understand. It's the quiet realization that they're simply not relevant anymore, that you've moved so far beyond the pain they caused, that encountering them is just neutral. A footnote. Ancient history. My name is Elena, and I'm not my trauma. I'm not my disability. I'm not the girl someone left. I'm the woman who rose from the ashes of that old life and built something beautiful from the ruins. I'm the professional who helps others find their strength. I'm the daughter who made her parents understand that worth isn't about perfection. I'm the sister who showed Maya that resilience is real. I'm the friend who shows up. I'm the advocate who speaks truth. And if there's anything I want you to take from my story, it's this. When someone treats you like you're not enough, believe them, and then prove that you're more than enough, not for them, but for yourself. Because at the end of the day, the best revenge isn't making someone suffer. It's building a life so full of purpose, joy, and meaning that their absence becomes the greatest gift they ever gave you.